Okay. All right, so let's actually do a little Virasana. So I am I'm taking 2 blankets, one folded for a little more height. Let's see how to do this. Okay, and then I'm just going to take another blanket and just roll the end a little bit. And I'm going to turn sideways. So you can always add more roll if you need more roll. You know, Nikki, you might need a 3rd blanket or a block as well. Right, or 2 blocks, right? You all have different needs. Okay, and then I'm going to shift forward and even bringing my head to the floor so I can scoot my blanket between or behind my knees. Hold it there as I sit back. And then use the other props, the blankets, the block to support, right? It just kind of opens up the back of the knee a little. I'm going to grab a block. Again, you can always do less behind the back of the knee or more behind the back of the knee, depending on what feels good, what feels right for your knee. I even sometimes like to use a sticky mat because it sticks and keeps its shape. My feet are wide. Okay. It takes a little bit of doing, right? So it just puts a little kind of gap in the back of the knee, plus you have a little bit of compression from the blanket. Again, you might want to sit your props up under your butt and then put the wedge behind the knees. Ah. Good, and if you're lucky, you get a little compression on your calf. Good, simple rotation, right? I have an extra block. I'm going to use it, simple rotation towards one side. Center, simple rotation to the other side. Good. First side again, let your breath, especially a nice full inhale, come into the ribs in your end range. It doesn't have to be your deepest rotation. And center and second side. Again, notice where the inhale feels more full, where it feels less full. And then coming back to center. Good. Let's take the arms out to the side. Good. Stretching the fingers towards the side of the room. Stretching the fingers towards the back of the room. Good. And then stretching the fingers forward, flexing the wrists. One more time, straight back. And then flex or extending wrists, bringing the fingers towards the back of the room and towards the front of the room. Good. Bend the arms. Let's do another straight fingers and then a little flexing forward and back. Forward and back. And then let's just do a little internal rotation on one arm, external rotation on the other. We'll keep them more this way. And then switch. And switch. And switch. One more. switch, and switch. And then just keeping this and bringing the hands towards the center line behind the body, if you can, and then exchange, and then switch. Good, notice what the shoulder blades are doing. Good. And let's take a break just for a moment. So one hand on kind of collarbone area, other arm moving slightly out and behind and turning away from that hand. But letting your hand on your collarbone almost move that tissue just very gently towards the fingers. And release, and let's do the other side. Hand on kind of collarbone, upper chest, pec minor area. Arm out to the side, maybe slightly up. Hand just guiding that tissue out towards the fingertips of the long arm. Good. Again, arms, one internally rotated. Again, can you keep that collarbone area wide? Even keep the shoulder blade area a little wide. There still is shoulder blades moving towards the spine, but not pinching, pushing the ribs forward. Good, one more. Behind, maybe even slide the hands towards each other. And then again, one arm internally rotated, one arm externally rotated, and slide. Do one more because it feels good. Good, maybe even looking up and looking down. And release and switch, other side. Looking up and looking down. Good, and center. Good, one hand on heart, one hand on belly. Inhale slowly into both hands. Notice if your breath goes upper hand, lower hand, or lower hand, upper hand. Letting your exhale get a little longer, inhale a little longer. Good, after your next exhale, inhale. Let's exhale with a hum. Feeling that reverberation through the body. The next one, we'll do the sound of Om, and again, that vibration moving through the body and then rippling out to wherever you would like to offer. And exhale completely, inhale. Om. Shifting forward, let's take all the props out. Good, bringing the feet a little more neutral instead of wide, toes under, and just shifting back and forward. So I'm shifting back, letting the toes help slow the descent of my hips towards my heels, and then pushing off the toes. Again, doesn't matter how deep the bend is, or the engagement of the toes and lower legs, noticing if your ankles are bowing out or your heels pushing out or in. See if you can kind of almost neutralize from hip, thigh bone, knee, lower leg bones, ankle, toes. neutral track. Good. And then let's just shift onto our backs. And grab our little straps, little bands. So laying on your back. Just taking a moment, feeling the hips get heavy, feel the ribs get heavy, back get heavy. Feet heavy. Let's actually extend the legs for a moment. Just noticing what's settling, what's not settling, what feels like it's tight or pulled or torqued. And let's bend the knees. Long, slow inhale. And long, slow exhale. Good, let's take right foot up on the band. Longer, slower inhale. Longer, slower exhale. So I'm going to start with the knee bend. Knee, again, a little bit more neutral on the hip joint. So knee in line with the hip joint, ankle, foot, somewhat neutral. And I'm just going to play with bending, assisted by the resistance or with the resistance, and then a little straightening. It doesn't have to be all the way straight, but just bending and straightening. It's more just allowing everything to track. Again, more about what's happening as you bend and straighten rather than how far or how much. Do you feel clicking? Do you feel full on one side rather than the other side? Smooth it out and let your breath be part of it. Good. Again, not looking for a lot of sensation. And then let's bend again, and I'm going to let the leg externally rotate. So now the knee is, right, the hip joint is externally rotated. The knee is out to the side a little bit. The toes turned out to the side a little bit, not a lot. And that same sense of in that slight externally rotated position, slow bend and slow straighten. And same thing, letting the bones track together, feeling what's happening in the joints, hip, knee, ankle, feeling the tissue, outer hip, outer thigh, knee, ankle, foot, as well as the inner. Right, we are working a little bit more strength into that outer line from hip to foot. Again, smooth and slow. Good, and then let's internally rotate, turn in. So the knee comes across the center line, right? It's pulled in, thighs pulled in towards the pubis, toes turned in a little, but they're all tracking together. And same, just a little bend and straighten. Just allowing all those tissues to remember that whole inner line. Kind of working in unison. Doesn't mean it's separate than the back line or the outer line or the front line. There is a little bit of a pattern in how our muscles organize. And then let's come back to center and just do a couple. Bend and straighten in that center line. Good. And then straight or quasi-straight, doesn't have to be straight all the way, but just a little point, right? Pressing the bottom of the foot into the band as you point and flex, right? Still using the resistance of the band. Point and flex, point and flex. And then let's take the band and I'm gonna pull with the right hand and let the foot turn to the right with the assistance of the band. And then the opposite, pull left, turn left. Pull right, turn right. And switch. And switch. And switch. Good. And coming back to center, bend the leg, foot to the floor, stretch both legs out, just feel the difference. Right leg, left leg. Notice your breath. Notice the hips, the back, the neck. And then let's bend the legs again. Other leg, left foot up on your strap. Again, starting with the knee in line with the hip, right? So in line with the hip joint, center of the hip. Good thigh, knee, lower leg, ankle, foot, all in one line. And then that's simple, just straightening and bending. Just notice how this side organizes. And I'm feeling different places that feel like they're overworking or compressed. And maybe there's more pull on one side. Or more sensation or less sensation. Or clicking. And if there's clicking, maybe go slower. If there's pull or grab, go slower. And let's bend the leg and do a little external rotation. It's not very big, but knee turns out to the side. Everything follows the knee, thigh, ankle, foot in a line. And that same bend and straighten. Good, and this will impact front hip. Not so much on the inner thigh, but a little. Like the inseam of the leg definitely has to accommodate that rotation. The outer leg, outer hip, outer knee, right? The relationship between the tibia and the fibula comes to play in the outer leg. Again, if there's clicking, go slower, just getting curious, or less, have less force through the tissue as you explore the relationships. Good, and then bend, come back to center, and then a little internal rotation. Right thigh comes in towards the pubis. And this simple right leg turning towards the opposite side. And focusing more on the inseam of the leg, and again, the organization of all of these joints. Hip, knee, ankle, foot. Good, impacting as well. The wrist and elbow and shoulder and neck. Good, bending and straightening, finding a nice rhythm that works, that's soothing, organizing. And then let's come back to neutral with the legs straight, doesn't have to be all the way straight. And again, pointing, flexing, pointing or plantar flexing, dorsiflexing. Notice what's happening in the toes. Even notice the alignment of the foot. Does it pull in or push out? Does it turn a little? Can the heel be somewhat neutral, or if it goes off track, play with that and then do a different track. It's not always the same track. Good, and then let's take our left hand, pull on the band, turn the foot to the left. Foot is also initiating. And then pulling right and left. And this will also do a little internal and external rotation at the hip joint. Good. And then coming to neutral. Bend the knee, extend both legs. Good, let's take one leg. So hands on the frontal hip bones. I'm just going to take one leg and roll it in and out. Like so, roll it in towards the center line and out. Noticing where there's more density or thickness. Right, my kind of front and inner thigh have much more density than the rest of the leg. And there's a smoothness in the roll in the foot and a little less smooth in the knee, a little more smooth in the hip. Noticing sensation, quality of movement. And then let that leg settle. And then the other leg rolling in and out. Can you let the legs stay heavy or weighted as you roll in and out? Is it easier to roll in or roll out? And where does the stickiness show up, if at all? Or density, or confusion, or clicking. And then let that leg settle. Good. Bend your knees again. All right, strap off to the side. All right. We've done these, it's been a while. So I'm just gonna play with subtle movements to start. So right foot, just a little bit of weight in the foot. Well, yeah, a little bit of weight in the foot. And I'm gonna lift that right hip off the floor. So back of the hip off the floor, the front of the hip lifts. And as the foot steps down, the hip follows, right? Tracks with the thigh towards the knee, towards the foot. And then slowly lowers back onto the floor. So I'm initiating more from the leg than from the hip itself. Pressing down into the foot, knee starts to lift, thigh starts to follow the knee, hip lifts. And then lower back down. Again, step into the foot, knee moves towards the foot, lifting, moving. thigh follows the knee, hip follows the thigh. Good. And one or two more of those, just feeling the movement, lifting and lowering, lifting and lowering. Good. And doing, let's actually do, well, let's do the left side. So left side, left foot, well, no, let's stay on the right side. So right hip pulling into the floor now. So I'm actually going to pull the hip back into the floor. Just going to make the foot now light. And then release that effort. Again, pulling the right hip back into the floor. That left foot or right foot's going to get a little light. And then releasing that effort. Pulling that hip back against the ground. Notice what happens in the front hip. And release. And again, just play with that a couple more times, just playing with that effort. Notice that there's a weight shift as the right hip gets heavy, the left hip gets a little light, and the pubis tips towards that right side. Good. And then release that effort. Good. Now let's go to the left side. So a little weight into the left foot. The knee will lift and move towards the toes. Thigh will follow. Hip will follow. And then slowly roll that hip down. And a little press. Knee towards the toes as it lifts. Thigh lifts. Hip lifts. And slowly lowers. And this is, again, much more of a weight shift. Left foot down. Pelvis rolls. That left hip is off the floor. More weight towards the right side or onto the right hip. And then lower both. Or lower that left hip down so the weight's even. Again, just playing with that. But heavy, knee lifting, thigh lifting, hip lifting, hip lowering. Feeling the movement through pelvis, through the lower back. Front of the pelvis, back, sides. And then come to settle. And then the opposite, pulling that left hip back into the ground. And then release. And then pulling that left hip into the ground. Left foot will get light. More weight will shift onto the left side, less on the right side. Pubis turning to the left. And then just do that a couple of times. Left hip pulling back. And it can be quite subtle, especially if there's any uncomfortability. Make it smaller, slower. This also helps to organize the pelvis. So, and really following the breath. And then let's come back to stillness. Okay, so let's play with right foot pressing. That's where we started, right foot pressing. Right knee lifting, thigh lifting, pelvis lifting, right tipping onto that left side. And then pulling that left hip into the ground. Left foot will get a little bit light, might even lift off the floor. And then let the pelvis roll back onto its back. And we'll just do the other side. Left foot pressing, knee lifting, thigh lifting, pelvis lifting. Right hip pulling back, so tipping the pelvis to the right, but I'm initiating and rolling back from the feet and pelvis. Right foot pressing, knee lifting, hip lifting, left hip pulling. Good, and just play with that back and forth. Again, can be quite small. Noticing what happens in front of pelvis, even lower back, back of pelvis. Good. And then come back to center for a moment and pause. And let's just extend the legs for a moment. Just noticing what you notice in your pelvis, legs, lower back, ribs. And let's bend knees again. This time let's take arms up to the ceiling. Like I'm holding a big beach ball very lightly on my chest. My arms are wrapping around gently. Shoulder blades can still be pretty heavy on the floor. Good, same movement in the pelvis. I'm just going to initiate from the left side to start. So left foot pressing, knee lifting, hip lifting, right hip pulling a little bit, just letting them synchronize. And then rolling onto the back of the pelvis. Right foot pressing, knee lifting, thigh lifting, hip lifting, left hip pulling. And notice if the back wants to arch. Or if the neck wants to get tight. Or if the jaw wants to get tight. And maybe letting the ball just counter. So if the knees go to the left, let the arms just shift to the right ever so slightly. And maybe even head, right? So my head wants to go same direction. Not necessarily. One side it wants to go same direction as the knees, other side it wants to go same direction as the arms. So notice what you notice, but just letting this move, right? Counter rotation within the upper body, whatever that means. And maybe the movement of the pelvis gets a little bigger. Again, if the right foot presses and the right hip lifts and the left hip pulls, maybe the left foot can lift. That'll just help you tip a little bit more. If that feels available in your, right, if your sacrum feels ready, if your lower back feels ready, if your mid back feels ready, you're listening to your body. Good, one more. And coming back to center, release the arms down, extend the legs. Good, and simple. Bend knees, arms out to the side. Just a couple of knee drops. So the feet are a little bit wider. Let's take knees to one side. Both knees, pelvis will again tip towards one side. You can even put a little weight into both feet if the body is ready for that. And it might bring a little more into inner thighs, front thighs. Again, let the movement be slow and simple. Head can move same direction as the knees. That's a little less torsion in the spine. right? It's a really nice, just rock side to side. And if you let the head counter rotate to the knees again, it's just a little more rotation through the whole center line. And last couple of breaths. And come back to center when you're ready. Good, extend legs. Maybe arms a little lower. And again, just feeling what is settling, what may be having a harder time settling. Letting that breath, again, always, right, when you are aware of it, when you become aware of your breath, just that in of itself may elongate the breath. But letting that touching with your body be connected to touching in with your breath. And let's bend knees, gently roll to the side. And come up to sit. And I'm going to slide to a wall. And I want the wall for the straight leg rather than a chair or a couch thing. So if you have that, and if you don't, you can always use a couch if you need to. But I am going to slide. And again, it doesn't have to be all the way to the wall. But I am going to have one blanket handy. I should have said that before I lay down. And bring one blanket under the pelvis. You get to decide how close to the wall you want to be. So we already did a little bit of back of leg work, so you might be able to get closer without a lot of pull. Good. And I'm going to play for a moment with letting the knees bend and letting the sitting bones really settle towards the ground. That sense of widening in the back of the pelvis, even widening between the sitting bones. And this is where the breath comes in, right? There's that relationship between the respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm. You can even kind of bring awareness to perineum, the tissue between the sitting bones, between anus and genitals. Almost letting that move towards the wall as you inhale, towards the wall and widening away from the center. Side to side, even front to back. Or even a sense of widening the sitting bones as you inhale. Good, and the sitting bones, the bottommost part closest to the skin. but it's quite a bit of, it's a big surface area, right? It's a, I have to show you a picture, but it's the surface where the external rotators attach. And then let's just play with a little bit of, again, sliding the heels maybe down the wall, feeling the sitting bones get heavier, back of pelvis wider. And then maybe sliding the heels up, just doing that a couple of times. Notice what happens in the back of the pelvis, base of the pelvis, backs of the knees. Even in the heels, do the toes roll out or in? Good, and then let the legs, whatever your version of straight is today, and just take a couple more breaths here, letting your sitting bones almost hang off of your heels. Just aware of softening that space between the heel, maybe along the Achilles, along the fullness of the gastroc and the soleus underneath. And the muscles of the toes underneath. Right, the back of the knee, the hollow in the back of the knee widening, back of the thigh widening from the inner thigh to the outer thigh. Good, and I have a lot of scar tissue in one side of my hamstring, and so I feel that pull on my pelvis. Just something, just noticing what isn't settling. Maybe it's breath, maybe it's bending both knees, just a slight amount. Maybe it's a slight internal rotation or a slight external rotation. Just last breath. Good, and then let's bend the knees, just bring the feet down towards the hips, and I'm going to take the feet wide. It's a little bit more of a squat shape. So my toes are turned out a little bit. I'm not turning them out all the way, just enough to let the knees open. Again, just noticing what you need under your pelvis, even if you need something behind the backs of the knees. Like a little balled up sock or a shirt behind both knees. And the knees might not bend as far as you would like. Doesn't matter. It's more about relationship, foot, knee, hip, sitting bone, pelvis. Tissue in that inner thigh, groin, and outer thigh, outer hip. And same sense of breath moving towards sitting bones. Breath moving to perineum. Or even just a sense of perineum to sitting bones to tailbone and anus, right? That whole back of the pelvic base. And perineum pubis, right? Pubis symphysis, two bones, right? It's where the two pelvic bones come together in the front. And the vaginal mouth and urethra. The front of the pelvic base. And the relationship of that whole from sitting bone to pubic symphysis, all the tissue of the inner thigh connected to our pelvic base, right? That they're inextricably connected. And just a couple more breaths here. Long, slow inhale, long, slow exhale. And then let's extend the legs out to the side. You can always put a block up against your outer thigh if this is too strong, or you can just walk your feet up so you're not in your end range. You can always stand blocks up to catch your outer thighs. You can always do one leg at a time, or you can go back to bent knees if this is too strong. But the blocks can always help as a midpoint. Again, just allowing the breath to lengthen and deepen. And there's a lot of focus on the inner leg, but also feeling back leg from tailbone, bottom of sitting bones to heels. Right, perineum, inner thigh, inner knee to inner foot. Good, more inner front, pubis. Kind of inner and top of knee. Top of foot, last breath or two. And extending these, you can use your hands if you'd like. Good, and then bring the knees to the front. Let's straighten the legs just for a breath. Good, and then let's bend knees, and I'm just gonna scoot myself away. You can also roll to the side. So I'm gonna keep my blanket at the wall and just bring my feet to the wall. If you have that room, if you don't, just reorganize yourself. However, to have the soles of the feet on the wall. Blanket under the heel, or you can take it out. Put it under your knees. Just feeling the soles of the feet. You can do this on a couch or a chair, just having your feet on something and your back against the ground and your hips against the ground. Let's just bring your hands to your belly. Just feeling your breath. You don't need to exaggerate the breath, don't need to do anything with the breath. Just feel it, hold it with your hands, with your body. Receiving and releasing. And receiving and releasing. A little movement in fingers and toes. A little movement in arms and legs, bending, folding. And slow little roll to your side. And coming up to sit. Again, one hand on heart, one hand on belly. Any just sense of appreciation for your body, right? We often think of it as this thing that carries us around. It's just that acknowledgement of the intelligence, right? Our body's ability not just to repair, but heal. Physically, mentally, emotionally, right? That support of our physicality to move us towards healing. And after your next exhale, inhale fully. Letting sound come out through your exhale, either a hum or an om. Namaste.